3 numbers. That is all this case needs to open. 228, 2.5 miles, 6 minutes. Hold those numbers. Do not let them go, because by the time this chapter ends, you will understand exactly why those 3 numbers have kept federal investigators locked in a room staring at 10,000 hours of surveillance footage, and why the FBI has said almost nothing publicly about what that footage contains. This is the Nancy Guthrie case. And if you think you already know the shape of it, you do not. Not yet. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now. Tell us where you are watching from. Tell us what city, what country, what time it is where you are sitting. This community has been running parallel to this investigation from day one, and your eyes matter here. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. When this case moves and the evidence makes clear it is already moving, this channel is where it posts first. Now, back to those numbers. At 2:28 a.m. on February 1st, 2026, a cardiac monitoring application on Nancy Guthrie's iPhone registered a disconnection. Her pacemaker, a device that had been tracking her heart's electrical activity around the clock, lost its Bluetooth link to her phone. That disconnection is not a theory. It is a documented, time-stamped medical data point that investigators confirmed publicly. Senior officials briefed on the investigation told NBC News that this signal loss occurred in the early morning hours of February 1st. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed it. The FBI confirmed it. The timestamp does not lie. Now understand what that disconnection means forensically. There are exactly 3 scenarios under which a pacemaker monitoring app loses its connection to a paired phone. The phone is moved beyond Bluetooth range from the device. The application is manually disabled. Or the person wearing the pacemaker is physically relocated beyond the signal threshold of her own home network. Every single one of those scenarios requires the same operational conclusion. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie was being moved. She was 84 years old. She had lived in the same home in the Catalina foothills of Tucson for more than 5 decades. She required daily cardiac medication and depended on that monitoring device for her continued health and safety. At 2:28 a.m., that device recorded the moment her world and her home separated. Now the second number. 2.5 miles. On Camino Royale, a residential back road running through the northern corridor of Tucson, a neighbor's Ring camera captured footage at 2:36 a.m. A vehicle moving through that corridor at a time when almost no one on that road has a reason to be moving. The Pima County Sheriff confirmed publicly that the timing of this vehicle's appearance aligns with the investigative timeline. The FBI confirmed the same, and then both agencies went silent. Completely deliberately silent around what that footage shows, what that vehicle is, and where it was heading. NBC correspondent Liz Kreutz drove the route between Nancy Guthrie's residence and the location on Camino Royale where the camera captured that vehicle. She chose the path a deliberate driver would choose at 2:30 inches the morning, the back road corridor, the route that avoids major intersections, the path someone takes when the objective is to move quickly and not attract a second glance. That drive took exactly 6 minutes, 2:28 a.m. Pacemaker disconnects. Add 6 minutes. You arrive at 2:34 a.m. The vehicle appeared on camera at 2:36 a.m. 2 minutes of margin. And you need to understand that those 2 minutes are not a discrepancy in the timeline. Ask yourself, if you had just moved someone from a locked residence in complete darkness, what would you do before accelerating onto a back road? You check your mirrors. You remove any item obscuring your face. You confirm the road ahead is clear. You take a breath, and you compose yourself before you press the accelerator. 2 minutes is the behavioral signature of someone transitioning from the operational phase of a plan to the exit phase. It is not a gap in the evidence. It is evidence. The Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos stated publicly that the vehicle's appearance is consistent with the investigative timeline. That statement is on the record. That is not a leak, not an anonymous source, not a social media theory. That is the lead agency on this case, placing the vehicle at that location within the window defined by medical data from a cardiac monitoring device. Now here is what the FBI has not said publicly. They have 10,000 hours of footage. They have cell tower records documenting which devices moved through that corridor between the Catalina foothills and Camino Royale during the window of 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. They have license plate reader data from the routes surrounding that corridor. They have every piece of digital intelligence a federal agency can pull from a geographic area in the 24 hours surrounding a confirmed abduction. And they have made zero public statements about the vehicle's make, its model, its direction of travel, or the name on any registration connected to it. The FBI does not go silent around evidence it does not have. The FBI goes silent around evidence it is protecting. A retired NYPD detective who reviewed the Ring camera footage publicly assessed the vehicle as a Kia Soul, a compact crossover, not a van, not an SUV built for cargo, a passenger vehicle, common, quiet. The kind of car that moves through a residential neighborhood at 2:30 in the morning and registers as nothing. A sleepless neighbor at a window sees it and looks away. That is not an accident. That is a selection. Someone chose that vehicle specifically because it would not be remembered. And design choices reveal the designer. Camino Royale feeds directly into East River Road. From that junction, the driver had immediate access to 4 separate directions. South on Oracle Road, toward Tucson City Center, and Interstate 19, which runs 60 miles directly to the Mexican border at Rio Rico. West on Campbell Avenue, through residential corridors toward a specific part of Tucson's urban grid. North toward Oro Valley, the suburb that sits at the top of the Catalina foothills and is home to a specific individual whose name this investigation keeps returning to. East into open desert sparse residential density. Dry washes, trailheads. Terrain where a former law enforcement official publicly assessed that a person could remain unlocated for months within a 2 to 5 mile radius of Nancy Guthrie's home. The FBI knows which direction that car was traveling at 2:36 a.m. They have not said. And that silence, that specific, deliberate withholding of a single directional detail means one of two things. They do not want the driver to know they have identified the footage, or they do not want the driver to know they have already traced the direction back to a destination. Either way, the silence is not confusion, it is architecture. 2 names sit at the center of that architecture. 2 men whose documented histories, geographic positions, and behavioral records place them inside the frame of this investigation, not through accusation, through the accumulated, publicly verified, officially confirmed weight of documented fact. 1 man dropped Nancy Guthrie at her front door 4 hours before she was moved from her home and has not spoken a single public word in over 5 weeks. 1 man whose physical profile falls precisely within the measurements the FBI established through forensic reconstruction at her front entrance. Tommaso Cioni Dominic Evans. 19 years of documented friendship connecting them to each other and both of them to the same road, the same corridor, the same 6-minute window. The car appeared at 2:36 a.m. The cardiac monitoring device disconnected at 2:28 a.m. The drive between those 2 points takes 6 minutes. But here is what every outlet covering this case has failed to connect. The vehicle alone is not what makes this evidence difficult to challenge. It is what the investigators call a behavioral artifact, a pattern of choices, routes, and documented movements that, taken individually, means nothing, but assembled across multiple dates and multiple observations, builds a portrait that is extraordinarily difficult to dismantle in a courtroom. And the behavioral record sitting at the center of this investigation goes back much further than February 1st. How far back it goes and what it shows is where this investigation gets specific. Before the evidence, before the footage, before the names, you need to know exactly who this woman is, because the moment you understand her life, the targeting becomes impossible to ignore. Nancy Ellen Long was born on the 27th of January, 1942, in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She graduated from the University of Kentucky, married Charles Errol Guthrie on the 28th of December, 1963, and built a life that crossed continents. Charles was a mining engineer. His work took their family to Melbourne, Australia, where their youngest daughter, Savannah, was born in 1971. 2 years later, the family landed in Tucson. They settled into a burnt adobe home in the Catalina foothills near Campbell Avenue and Skyline Drive, tucked into the high desert above the city. They planted roots there, and Nancy never left. She raised 3 children, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron, in that neighborhood. She built a career in public relations at the University of Arizona for nearly 2 decades. She became known by colleagues as someone who made the work lighter and the team stronger. When Charles died suddenly of a cardiac event during a work trip to Mexico in 1988, Nancy was 46 years old. She set aside her own grief to hold her family together. Savannah, then 16, would later say on the Today Show that her mother met every hard moment with iron discipline and unshakable faith. She never remarried. She never left the foothills. She lived alone in that same home for more than 50 years. By February 2026, Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She had limited mobility. She depended on a pacemaker and required daily cardiac medication to manage her heart condition. Her mind, by all family accounts and confirmed by the Pima County Sheriff, remained completely intact. She was sharp, independent, fixed in her routines. She attended a virtual church service every Sunday morning without exception. When she did not appear on February 1st, a church member called the family. The family searched the home. Then they called 911. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments. This community follows this case closer than any outlet covering it, and your presence here matters. Nancy Guthrie did not vanish. She was taken, and the people who took her knew exactly where she was, how she lived, and when she would be alone. Saturday, January 31st, 2026, the last ordinary evening Nancy Guthrie would ever have. At 5:32 p.m., she opened the Uber app on her phone, requested a ride, and made the short trip from her Catalina Foothills home to her daughter Annie's house nearby. She had dinner there. She played card games. She spent roughly 4 hours with Annie and Tommaso Cioni, the man Annie had married into the Guthrie family. It was routine. It was comfortable. Nothing about the evening, by any account, was unusual. At approximately 9:48 p.m., Tommaso Cioni drove Nancy home. Her garage door opened. It closed again at 9:50 p.m. Cioni confirmed later that he watched until she was safely inside before he pulled away. That 2-minute window, the garage opening and closing, is the last confirmed, documented moment anyone in this case can place Nancy Guthrie inside her home, alive and accounted for. Then, the house goes quiet, the lights go off, and the clock starts. For the next 3 hours and 57 minutes, the verified record is silent. No calls, no outbound messages, no movement registered on any subscribed recording system inside the property. Nancy Guthrie was alone in a house she had occupied for more than 50 years, in a neighborhood she knew by heart, in a bed she had slept in through 5 decades of desert nights. Whatever was coming, she had no reason to expect it. At 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera mounted at her front entrance disconnected. Not a power surge, not a malfunction. The device went offline at a specific moment in a specific window that investigators have publicly confirmed is directly relevant to the timeline of her disappearance. The Pima County Sheriff stated this clearly. The FBI confirmed it. Someone removed that camera's ability to record before approaching the front door. That is not a coincidence. That is sequencing. That is a plan unfolding in real time. Approximately 25 minutes later, at around 2:12 a.m., a secondary Nest camera, elsewhere on the property, registered a motion detection event. There was no recording. Nancy did not have an active cloud subscription on that device. The software saw something. The drive that should have captured it was empty. Then, 2:28 a.m., the cardiac monitoring application on Nancy Guthrie's iPhone lost its connection to her pacemaker. Her phone, her wallet, her hearing aid, her daily cardiac medication, and her car were all recovered inside the home. She did not walk out. She did not call anyone. Every item that would tell you a person chose to leave was still sitting exactly where she left it. The only thing missing was Nancy. When investigators entered the residence and processed the front entrance, they recovered biological trace material confirmed by DNA analysis to belong to Nancy Guthrie. Sheriff Nanos told the New York Times there were additional things at that scene that, in his words, did not sit well, details he declined to elaborate on publicly. The front doorbell camera mount was empty. The device itself had been removed. In 41 minutes, between 1:47 a.m. and 2:28 a.m., someone moved through a locked, gated residential property in complete darkness, neutralized the recording equipment, and relocated an 84-year-old woman with limited mobility from her home without triggering a single alarm that saved footage. That level of precision does not belong to a stranger who picked a house at random. It belongs to someone who had already walked that property in their mind long before they walked it in the dark. And the evidence waiting on the other side of that front door was about to tell investigators exactly what kind of person they were looking for. 9 days. That is how long the footage sat beyond reach. When investigators first processed Nancy Guthrie's Nest doorbell camera after she was reported missing on February 1st, 2026, the answer they needed was right there, mounted to the front of her house, 6 feet above the entrance she walked through every day. But without an active cloud subscription on that device, the locally stored footage was gone. The camera had seen everything. The drive that should have held it was empty. Then, the FBI's technical team went deeper. Director Kash Patel confirmed publicly on February 10th that agents had recovered footage from residual data located in the back-end systems of the camera's server infrastructure. Google provided technical assistance. And what that recovery pulled out of dormant server data changed the entire public face of this investigation. The footage showed a masked figure approaching Nancy Guthrie's front door in the early hours of February 1st. The subject was covered from head to toe, dark clothing, black gloves, sneakers. A face mask, which the FBI noted appeared lighter in the footage due to the Nest camera's infrared imaging technology. The mask was black. The subject was carrying a black 2.5-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack, a backpack sold exclusively under Walmart's private label brand. And the individual was carrying what appeared to be a secured firearm in a front-mounted holster on their body. Retired FBI agents and law enforcement analysts who reviewed the footage publicly noted something specific about the way the figure moved. Not rushed, not panicked. One former FBI agent described the approach as almost relaxed, as though the subject moved through that entrance the way someone moves through a space they already know. There was no hesitation at the gate, no pause to orient. The geometry of the property appeared familiar. The figure raised a gloved hand and placed it directly over the camera lens. Then, when that was insufficient, reached into nearby vegetation at the front of the property and used a cut section of shrub to cover the device completely. That sequencing, hand first, then vegetation, is not improvisation. That is a method. A person who had thought about this camera before they arrived. Here is where the footage becomes most significant forensically. The FBI released 2 distinct sets of images from the doorbell camera recovery. A source confirmed to CNN that the images were captured on 2 separate dates, not just the morning of February 1st. The subject had been at Nancy Guthrie's front door before she vanished. The FBI erected a white tent over her front entrance, ran measurements under forensic lighting conditions replicating the infrared environment of the camera, dressed agents in replica clothing, and confirmed the subject's height, between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches tall, average build. And in infrared footage, former FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jim Clemente identified what appeared to be a marking on the subject's right wrist, possibly a tattoo. If confirmed, that marker becomes a biometric anchor, one that rules people in or out of the suspect pool with precision. Ask yourself this: what kind of person scouts a residence, returns on a second occasion fully prepared, and moves through a locked front entrance in complete darkness without triggering a single alarm? The answer to that question is not a stranger. It is someone operating from prior knowledge, and the 2 names this investigation keeps returning to both had access to that knowledge. When investigators need to understand a disappearance, the first question they ask is simple: who was the last person to see her? In this case, that answer has never changed. It is always pointed to the same man. Tommaso Cioni is 50 years old. He was born on June 18, 1975, in San Giovanni Valdarno, a historic medieval town in the Tuscany region of Italy. He relocated to Tucson in 2006, the same year he married Annie Guthrie, Nancy's eldest daughter. He has taught 6th grade science and AP biology at Basis Oro Valley School for more than 15 years. His school sits approximately 10 miles north of Nancy Guthrie's Catalina Foothills home. He describes himself in a personal biography on an Italian Cultural Association website as someone who writes when he gets the chance, studies lizards, plays electric bass, and makes homemade pasta. By every external measure, a quiet, private man. He drove Nancy home on the night of January 31st. He confirmed she was inside before he pulled away. His car disappeared from her driveway at 9:50 p.m. And from that moment, the documented record of his involvement in this investigation is both extensive and almost entirely one-sided. The FBI searched Annie and Cioni's home 5 separate times. The first search occurred on February 7th, 6 days after Nancy was reported missing. Investigators returned to the property and remained inside for several hours, photographing multiple rooms while law enforcement vehicles surrounded the area. During one visit, agents were observed carrying a silver briefcase into the residence. During another, they exited carrying a white case and a brown evidence bag, one agent wearing blue gloves. Former FBI agent Tracy Walder assessed those items publicly. The white case as evidence processing equipment, the brown bag as collected evidence. 5 documented returns to the same residential address across an active federal investigation is not standard procedure. Each return represents a specific evidentiary objective that required investigators to go back. Annie's vehicle was also towed and impounded as part of the investigation. Sheriff Nanos confirmed this publicly, though he declined to elaborate on the specific evidentiary connection. Now the public record. Savannah Guthrie posted multiple emotional videos from Arizona. Annie cooperated so fully with investigators that they searched her property repeatedly and took her vehicle. Cameron Guthrie, Nancy's son, a retired Air Force colonel, spoke directly on camera, addressing whoever was responsible, appealing for his mother's return. Every member of the Guthrie family produced a visible, documented public presence in the days following Nancy's disappearance. Cioni produced nothing, not one public statement, not one appearance beside Annie during any of her public-facing moments, not one word directed toward the investigation, the family's appeal, or the reward. Now the measurement. The FBI's forensic reconstruction at Nancy's front entrance established the subject's height as between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches. Multiple investigative journalists and analysts who reviewed photographs of Cioni placed him consistently near 6 feet, approximately 183 centimeters. The numbers do not align. That is not exoneration. That is a measurement. And in this investigation, every measurement points investigators toward the next question rather than away from it. Cioni has not been named a suspect. He has not been charged, but the investigative record surrounding him, 5 property searches, an impounded vehicle, and more than 5 weeks of unbroken public silence while the family around him publicly disintegrated is a documented pattern that behavioral analysts describe as entirely consistent with someone who is operating under direct legal advice. The silence is not passive. It is a decision made again every single day. But Cioni is only one name. The second name entered this investigation not through family proximity, but through a criminal court record. And the physical description that the FBI established at Nancy's front door fits that second name with a precision that investigators have never publicly dismissed. On February 4th, 2026, 3 days after Nancy Guthrie was reported missing, an X account operated by someone identifying themselves as an investigator posted a screenshot. It was a Pima County court record. The name at the top of that document was Dominic Aaron Lee Evans. The charges listed beneath it were felony burglary, robbery, theft, embezzlement, and DUI. Within hours, that screenshot had moved across every true crime platform covering this case. Multiple outlets independently verified the records through the Arizona Pima County court system. The charges were real. The record belonged to a 8-year-old 5th-grade teacher and drummer from Tucson who had spent nearly 2 decades playing music with Tommaso Cioni. Now understand something before the physical record. What unfolded next for Dominic Evans and his family is a documented consequence of what happens when publicly available court records collide with a high-profile federal investigation and an internet with too many hours and too few. Facts. Evans's home address was leaked online. Dozens of people showed up on his residential street overnight. His wife Andrea told the New York Times she spent hours in a darkened bedroom, unable to turn on a light, watching through the window as strangers gathered outside. Their 6-year-old son, who had never spent a night away from his parents, was sent to relatives for safety. Evans told the Times directly, "I feel like someone's taken my name." Sheriff Nanos responded publicly. He called the situation horrible, said Evans was going through hell, and stated on the record that Evans should consult attorneys and consider suing those making unverified claims for libel. Evans has not been named a suspect. He has not been charged. He has not been arrested in connection with this case. Those facts are not in dispute. What investigators work from is the documented record. Evans's verified height is consistent with the FBI's established range of 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches. His build, as visible in publicly available photographs and video, is consistent. Dark facial hair visible in those same materials is consistent with the masked subject's profile. He lives in Tucson. He knows this city's geography. And his legal history includes a charge of burglary defined under Arizona law as entering or remaining unlawfully in a structure with the intent to commit a felony inside. The legal definition and the documented behavior on Nancy Guthrie's doorbell footage describe the same operational sequence: a figure moving through a gated entrance, navigating a private property with the composure of someone for whom the geometry was not new. Evans met Nancy Guthrie once, he said, at an Easter gathering at her home in 2011. He brought one of his sons for an Easter egg hunt. He walked onto that property. He saw that entrance. He was inside that gate. His alibi for the night of January 31st into February 1st was his home, his wife, and their children. His wife corroborated it. Phone data supported the account. Investigators interviewed him for approximately 40 minutes 1 week into the case and had not contacted him again as of the date of his New York Times interview. What exists is the physical description. What exists is the documented proximity to Cioni. And the question this investigation has been asking since the first week is not how many times Evans met Nancy. It is how much Evans knew about her and from whom he learned it. That answer lives inside 19 years of documented friendship. April 2007, Tucson, Arizona. 2 separate people read 2 separate online postings and ended up in the same room. Dominic Evans' drummer had connected with guitarist Walter Gonsalves through a Craigslist ad. Tommaso Cioni, already married to Annie Guthrie, already embedded in the Guthrie family, answered a separate posting in the Tucson Weekly. The 3 of them clicked immediately. They called the band Early Black, indie, post-punk, grunge-tinged. They played local venues across Tucson, traveled occasionally to Phoenix and Flagstaff, shared stages with acts circulating through Arizona's regional indie circuit. In late 2009 and early 2010, they entered Loveland Studios with Tucson music engineer Nathan Sabatino and recorded their debut album. The title was Life, Love, Murder. It received positive reviews in the Tucson Weekly. The band continued writing and gigging locally well into the following years. 19 years of rehearsals, 19 years of road trips and studio time, and the kind of ordinary accumulated conversation that fills a long friendship. And for every single one of those 19 years, Cioni was already the son-in-law of Nancy Guthrie. What investigators are asking is not a complicated question. It is the most basic question in proximity analysis. What does a person learn about a family over 19 years of documented friendship with someone who married into it? Not through interrogation, not through surveillance, through conversation, the kind that happens in a car between gigs, in a rehearsal space after everyone else has gone home. In the ordinary passing of information between 2 people who trust each other across nearly 2 decades of shared history, her address, her routines, her medical limitations, her security setup, the layout of her property, the gate at the front of her driveway, whether she had a dog, whether she slept lightly, what time she turned off her lights. Evans confirmed he met Nancy once in 2011 at an Easter gathering at her Catalina Foothills home. He walked onto that property. He passed through that gate. He saw the entrance. That is, on the record. But the question investigators are constructing an answer to is not about Easter 2011. It is about the 19-year pipeline of incidental knowledge that flows through ordinary friendship, the way water finds a crack in stone. quiet, invisible, unstoppable. One road connected both men's geographic positions on the morning of February 1st. One friendship built over 19 years connected both men's knowledge of that property. And the evidence that has been running silently in a federal laboratory since the first week of this investigation is now closing the distance between that knowledge and the name attached to it. Everything this investigation has built comes down to 4 layers of evidence, not theories, not speculation. Documented, verified, officially confirmed forensic and investigative data that has been accumulating in federal files since the morning of February 2nd, 2026. Understand each layer. Understand where it stands, because the gap between where that evidence is right now and a name on a charging document is narrower than any public statement has acknowledged. Layer 1. The vehicle. A car appeared on a Ring camera on Camino Royale at 2:36 a.m. on February 1st. A retired NYPD detective publicly assessed the footage and identified the vehicle as a Kia Soul, a compact crossover. Common, quiet, a vehicle selected not for size, but for invisibility. The Pima County Sheriff confirmed the timing of that vehicle's appearance aligns with the investigative timeline. The FBI confirmed it. And then both agencies went silent about the direction that car was traveling. The FBI has 10,000 hours of footage from the corridor surrounding Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood Ring cameras, license plate readers, and surveillance systems that together map every vehicle that moved through that geography between midnight and dawn on February 1st. They know what that footage shows. They have not said. Layer 2. The gloves. On February 15th, deputies located a black glove approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's Catalina Foothills home. It visually matched the gloves worn by the masked figure in the doorbell camera footage. It was sent to a private forensic laboratory in Florida for analysis. The DNA recovered from that glove belonged to an unknown male. It was submitted to CODIS, the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, a national database holding over 19 million offender profiles. No match was returned. The glove DNA also did not match any sample recovered inside the residence. On March 2nd, Sheriff Nanos confirmed publicly that the glove DNA had been traced to a local restaurant employee working across the street from where the glove was found. That individual has been cleared entirely. The glove is resolved. The interior profile is not. Layer 3. The home DNA. On February 13th, the Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed that DNA collected from inside Nancy Guthrie's residence did not match her or anyone in her immediate circle. Sheriff Nanos stated publicly on February 19th that the sample is a mixed DNA profile genetic material from more than one contributor and that investigators believe it may belong to the suspect. The sample was sent to a private forensic laboratory in Florida for separation and analysis. The lab reported challenges with the mixture ratio. Nanos was transparent about it. He said their lab told them there were challenges, but that the technology was advancing fast enough that resolution was expected in weeks or months. The investigation was not waiting. Investigative genetic genealogy is now active on this case. This is the same methodology that identified the Golden State Killer after more than 40 years, that identified Brian Kohberger in the University of Idaho murders through a pizza crust, that broke the Gilgo Beach case through a discarded coffee cup. It does not require a CODIS match. It does not require the suspect to have ever submitted a DNA sample anywhere. It requires one relative anywhere in a commercial genealogy database, and it builds a family tree from there until the name at the end of that tree can only belong to one person. Layer 4. The cell tower records. Pulled in federal evidence files, documenting every device that moved through the corridor between the Catalina Foothills and Camino Royale between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. On February 1st, 2026, the FBI has not disclosed what those records show. That silence is deliberate, and it tells you everything about where this investigation is actually standing. 4 layers, 1 vehicle on camera, 1 interior biological profile under genealogy analysis, cell tower data in federal files, and a physical description 5'9" to 5'10", average build, possible wrist marking that has never been formally matched to a name and never been formally ruled out. The glove was a dead end. What was left behind inside that house was not. The evidence in this case does not only live in a laboratory. It lives in patterns, in choices, in the documented record of what people do when the pressure of a federal investigation closes in around them. On February 2nd, the morning after Nancy Guthrie was reported missing, ransom correspondence began moving through media channels. By February 3rd, TMZ and two local Tucson television stations, KOLD and KGUN, had received letters demanding millions of dollars in cryptocurrency for her safe return. The notes included two hard deadlines: February 5th, February 9th. One note reportedly demanded $6 million and included a direct threat against Nancy's continued safety if payment was not made. The family posted video publicly stating, "We will pay." Both deadlines passed. No confirmed communication from whoever sent those notes followed either one. The FBI confirmed it was taking the correspondence seriously while simultaneously running a parallel track. Investigators fanned out across Tucson's gun stores with a specific objective, tracking down the firearm and holster visible in the doorbell camera footage. They canvassed clothing retailers, cross-referencing the dark Walmart-consistent clothing and mask visible on the figure. They knocked on doors in a 2-mile radius from Nancy's home, requesting surveillance footage going back to January. They were not searching blindly. They were building a behavioral map, a documented record of who moved where, when, and in what vehicle across the weeks leading up to February 1st. Then the Google Trends data surfaced. Fox News Digital reported that search activity for Nancy Guthrie's home address had occurred in Arizona as early as June 2025. Additional search spikes appeared in January 2026, weeks before she vanished. Searches for Savannah Guthrie's salary originating from Tucson were detected in December 2025. Investigators and analysts were careful to note that Trends data is not definitive, but in the context of an investigation already anchored by pre-operational surveillance visits to the property, it adds one more documented data point to the behavioral timeline. What you are watching is not a case that is standing still. The FBI contacted Mexican authorities. Polygraph examinations were used to further clear individuals in the investigation. A $1 million reward now sits on the table. And the genealogy tree being built from the interior biological profile in a Florida laboratory does not wait for cooperation, does not need a confession, and does not stop running. What is it worth to stay silent? The answer to that question has a number on it, and that number is sitting in a federal evidence file, building a name, one relative at a time. This is where the case stands right now. Not a month ago, not 2 weeks ago, right now. On March 2nd, 2026, Sheriff Chris Nano sat down with NBC News and said 4 words that every person following this investigation needed to hear. Investigators are definitely closer. He confirmed that a dedicated team from the Pima County Sheriff's Homicide Unit has been formally embedded with the FBI's Tucson Task Force, 4 detectives and a personal advance sergeant stationed at the FBI field office, working this case full-time alongside federal agents. He stated clearly that he operates under the belief that Nancy Guthrie is still alive. He said there is information in the investigation that he will not share publicly because doing so would compromise the prosecution being built around it. Not the investigation, the prosecution. Then on March 5th and 6th, something new surfaced. FBI agents and sheriff's deputies returned to the Catalina foothills and began canvassing Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood door to door, not for witness statements this time, but for a specific technical question. Had residents noticed any disruption to their internet service on the night of February 1st? Multiple homeowners confirmed to investigators they had. Connectivity issues. Ring cameras with gaps in their histories from that exact window. An antenna-like device, visible in the pocket of the figure, captured on Nancy's doorbell footage, has prompted investigators to pursue a specific theory. That a signal jamming device may have been deployed in the neighborhood that night, deliberately disabling nearby cameras and internet-connected recording systems before the operation began. Think about what that means. A signal jammer is not something a person grabs impulsively. It requires advanced knowledge of the target's security infrastructure. It requires planning at a technical level. It requires someone who knew exactly which systems were running in that neighborhood and made a deliberate operational decision to neutralize them before approaching that front door. The investigation has now touched every layer of this case simultaneously. The vehicle on Camino Royale is still being analyzed across hundreds of thousands of traffic records. The interior biological profile remains in a Florida laboratory under active forensic separation and genetic genealogy analysis. The Pima County Attorney's Office has veteran prosecutors embedded in the investigative team, confirming this case has already crossed into pre-prosecution architecture. A retired FBI expert called this case the polar opposite of a cold case, describing it as red hot, with up to 100 agents and analysts working active leads. Two names remain at the center of the documented evidence record: Tommaso Cioni, Dominic Evans, neither charged, neither formally named as a suspect by law enforcement. Both connected by 19 years of documented friendship. Both geographically positioned along the same corridor that a vehicle traveled at 2:36 a.m. on February 1st. Both sitting inside the frame of an investigation that Sheriff Nanos says is moving and moving closer every single day. The genealogy tree does not need a confession. It does not ask for cooperation. It builds itself, one relative at a time, from whatever is sitting in a public database, and when the branch ends, there is a name. That name is already in the data. The algorithm is already running. And the distance between where this investigation stands today and a suspect being publicly named is, by every verified, documented official account, shorter than it has ever been. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She has been absent from the home she built her life inside for 36 days. She deserves to be found. If you know anything at all, contact the FBI tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit directly at tips.fbi.gov. The family reward stands at $1 million. The FBI's own reward stands at $100,000. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on every notification. The moment a suspect is publicly named, the moment the DNA results are confirmed, the moment this investigation moves from evidence to arrest, this is where that video goes live first. Share this with everyone following this case. The more eyes on the evidence, the harder it becomes to stay invisible. We are not stopping, not until she is found.